so much news to talk about today. So I'm just going to say straight away, if you haven't followed me and subscribed here on my channel, definitely hit the like button for this live stream, the subscribe button, and also join my membership. There are different levels of membership that you can join right here on YouTube. My name is Dr. Sandra Colton-Medici. I'm so glad that it is Monday and you are here with me. Let's get into some of these top stories because there are so many stories this morning that I'm just like, can we please just start with one that is something that happened over the weekend that I think we are just looking at with this sort of skepticism and also really sad sort of outlook when one of Donald Trump's advisors says things like this. Stephen Miller says the White House is looking into suspending habeas corpus, which protects people from unlawful detentions. Quote, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. There is a story out this morning that's talking about a lot of judges who are overseeing some of these federal cases that Donald Trump has in the court systems right now, where they have been receiving a lot of pizza deliveries, basically in attempts to what I've come to understand as intimidation tactics, almost like, hey, we know where you live, this is why you're receiving this pizza. And if a lot of it depends on whether or not the courts do the right thing or not, it feels a little bit like some of the people who are sending these pizzas are sending another message like, go along to get along. Hi, Vivian, how are you? It's Monday, and I feel like this sort of idea of suspending habeas corpus, I have seen a lot of people on social media say, if you are being arrested and they suspend habeas corpus, that means that when you go into a sort of detention, you don't have the rights that you would have had before to say, I should not have been detained. Because you then have no due process. Okay, so if you go into this sort of thing where somebody's running you down, let's say it's a police officer and they want to take you in, they can take you in and then do whatever they would want to do with you, send you wherever they want. You would have no right to defend your right as a person to exist. Now, this is a very dangerous, slippery slope that we are going into because they want to just do with people what they want because they say we have so much of such a heinous immigrant problem here. Everybody's a terrorist, everybody's a murderer, everybody's a rapist. Oh my God, that we must just throw them in the jail and lock away these people and throw away the key, right? Send them to other places. First it was Guantanamo, then it was El Salvador, now they're floating Libya and potentially Ghana, a lot of different places that Marco Rubio's just been touring random prison facilities. And I've seen some people talk about the language that we need to be using has to fit what the actions are that this administration, the GOP, is complicit with, and Republicans on a whole, okay? That we should be using the right, appropriate language when we hear things like this. So if we hear that they have been arrested, no, they have been kidnapped, okay? If we hear people are being sent to prisons, no, they're being sent to death camps or concentration camps, okay? If we hear that people are protecting women, right? Really, it's about controlling women's bodies, right? So we need to start using the appropriate language to describe the actions that they are actually taking. Tell me what you think about suspending habeas corpus, because when we think of like, oh, we just need to suspend it for these people, which is what he's trying to say, it really means suspending it for all. It's almost like when religious institutions get to have vouchers for high schools, middle schools, public schools, those private schools that are getting the vouchers have to then be afforded to all religious schools. So when they talk about Catholic schools or Christian-based schools, right, getting these sort of religious vouchers, they have to remember that this opens it up to building, Jewish temples or, different religions that could participate in these sort of handouts from the government as well, the ones that they don't want to actually benefit from those handouts, right? So a lot of times we see this sort of pro-Christian, pro-Catholic sort of stance but they forget that when it goes to one, it goes to all, except when they make exceptions in the laws, right? So they're going to have to sort of start carving out what they mean every single time they make up their laws and put them into effect, because if we suspend habeas corpus for one, we suspend it for all. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be. So I wanted to start off with that, but then I wanted to get to something that I saw on Yahoo, which is a travel and leisure article. Now they're talking about summer getaways, okay? And I'm sure that they've done this before, where they have, talked about the 10 best small town getaways in the US, right? That they're probably doing this in another sense of the small town getaway, because a lot of people, one, don't have money to travel, two, cannot afford the sort of stress of traveling outside of the United States for fear of re-entering and having to be detained, right? So I wanted to point this out because it just seems like we are focused on traveling in the United States because there are reports of borders at the Canadian border having roadblocks, and them basically stopping people who are trying to enter Canada and leave the United States, which is just really suspicious to me, that like suddenly we want to know why you're leaving the United States. So there have been reports of those kinds of roadblocks for people trying to leave the United States. And on the US side, not on necessarily the Canadian side, but on the US side now, where there were never roadblocks before. But anyways, let's get into what they say are some of the best small towns. I've actually, some of these I've heard of, some of these I've never heard of. Jackson, Wyoming, I've heard of. I've actually never been to any of these. Let me know in the comments if you've ever actually visited any of these small towns. Crested Butte, Colorado. I absolutely love the scenery. I think Colorado is so beautiful. I've only ever been to Denver though. The Kennebunks, I think is what it's called, the Kennebunks, Maine. I've never been to Maine. So this is one on the East Coast that I've actually never been to. Easton, Maryland. Okay, I've been to Maryland, but I've never been to Easton, Maryland. The next one is St. Francisville, Louisiana. I've actually never, well, no, I've been in Louisiana, but I've never been to St. Francisville. Telluride, Colorado. I have seen this in probably so many movies, but I've never been to Telluride. St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I've been in Georgia, I've been to Atlanta, but never to St. Simon's Island. Or is it St. Simon's? No, maybe it's St. Simon's. Ketchum, Idaho. I've been in Idaho, but I've never been to Ketchum, Idaho. And Spring Lake, New Jersey. Been in New Jersey, never to Spring Lake. And the last one was Salida, Colorado. So a lot of these were in Colorado. Clearly they've got the mountains, they've got the rivers and things like that. So there's a lot of great sort of outdoorsy things to do in a lot of these places. What do you like about small towns? If you're coming into my live stream and you haven't ever been to any of these small towns, what do you like about going to visit a small town? I'm a big city girl. I love, I'm bonded with cement, but I love, kind of doing the whole like walking down Main Street, find a really cute, unique sort of shopping opportunity, eating the local fare, whatever it might be. I love that kind of aspect of going to a small town. Hey, Calvin, how are you? Thank you so much. And I love sort of the idea of finding something that might be like a hidden gem, like just discovering something. Now, can I stay in small towns for a very long time? Probably not, because I love the sort of hustle and bustle of big cities. There's something I used to say a long, long time ago, when I would come back into LA and go, fly into LAX, and I would get off the plane and I would come out into, the sort of LAX atmosphere, right? After you get your bag and you walk out of the doors and you're going to find your car or your Uber, whatever. And I would always say, it's the smell of busy that I miss, right? That when you walk into that sort of, car infested, people just kind of trying to get to places. And I always loved that sort of, it's the smell of busy, right? Mark, thank you so much. Tom, hey, can I ask a question? Absolutely. Will I answer it? That remains to be seen. We will see. Let's get to some really important other stories. Okay. This is one that I think everybody is going to be watching this week. House Republicans unveil Medicaid cuts that Democrats are warning will leave millions without care. So, a lot of times, we are looking at the sort of Congress and the division that there is in Congress and the sort of very slim majority that Republicans have in Congress. And then let's say they pass something by that very slim majority, okay? And then it goes to the Senate. The Senate also has a very big hurdle. So this big, beautiful bill that they're trying to pass in Congress may have this very big hurdle when it comes to the Senate. Let's see, Daniel Valentine Salida is my favorite place. Very nice. I feel like a lot of them, we all have our sort of bucket list that we want to, visit in our lifetime. Um, I feel like Colorado is one that I would like to explore more. Even Canada, I feel like, is another place that I would like to explore more. Vivian says, I'm more for countryside and nature. Yes, I feel like some people just really enjoy that sort of, solitude sometimes, being out in and, with the trees, with the birds, with the sort of nature aspect of life. And some people just like the noisy side of, police vehicles and, all of that. But let's get into this article a little bit more. It says House Republicans have unveiled the cost-saving centerpiece of President Trump's big, beautiful bill, at least $880 billion in cuts, largely to Medicaid to help cover the cost of a $4.5 trillion cut for the wealthiest people to give them a tax break. So do remember that as they're doing all these big, beautiful bill cuts to Medicaid and putting a lot of people's health at risk, they are giving tax breaks to people who don't need them. Okay. And the people who benefited today from the stock market having a great moment due to the tariff sort of pause and some sort of reductions, those same people that benefited today in the stock market are the same people that are going to get these tax breaks. Let's go to this one. Jury selection. Okay. They already finished. We've been waiting for this trial for Sean Diddy Combs for a while. What do you think will be the sort of bombshell that drops? Because I feel like it's going to be bombshell after bombshell after bombshell when it comes to his court cases. Things that you did not need to know in your lifetime, things you thought that no one ever did probably in your lifetime. I feel like it's all going to be in this court case. I don't even know. It says Cassie Ventura could take the stand today. Now, you remember that she was his longtime girlfriend. She had a lawsuit that was very well crafted as to how she sued him and his company in regards to like an HR violation, in addition to sort of emotional distress, pain, suffering, all of that. And that was settled very, very quickly. And she might be testifying today. Now, all of this is not being televised. There are some sketch artists that have been sort of drawing, during jury selection and things like that. What would you have done if you went for jury duty and you ended up in the courtroom being questioned by Diddy's lawyers? I mean, like, it's almost like when people came to the LA courthouse. I think it was not LA, it was Simi Valley. I think it was Simi Valley when there was a Michael Jackson trial. And they had no idea, like, that they were going to be, it was the death trial, like when they were prosecuting the guy who gave him like the overdose supposedly of, I think, fentanyl or whatever, where you like would be in that sort of jury room going, yes, I listened to Michael Jackson. Yes, I liked him. No, I didn't like him, or whatever you had to say. Like that, those are probably the types of questions they had to be asked about P. Diddy. Like, did you listen to him? Do you think he's a good person? Like, would you be influenced if you heard his music? Like, I don't know. That would have been a strange experience versus somebody, maybe you going to a jury selection and not knowing the person. and not having any sort of thoughts about his work, his music, his life, his children, his empire, so to speak. It's very interesting, all of it. Let's talk about this. Divided Supreme Court on full display heading into birthright citizenship hearing. The fact that they are actually going to have a sort of hearing about whether or not we get the right to have birthright citizenship is fantastically horrible. Gaurav says, I don't think so. Diddy is a good person. Who knows, right? For Diddy, I mean, the video that I saw of the sort of hotel encounter between him and Cassie, I think, in my opinion, makes him not a good person just from that video. And I don't know anything about his sort of off-screen personality, his sort of in real life persona. I only know his persona of what we've seen on TV interviews, where he looks like he's patting down Justin Bieber, where he kind of stares down Ellen DeGeneres, different things where we've seen him act and speak in public. So we don't know what he's like out of the public eye unless you've been at one of those parties, or if you are one of his friends, or you experienced whatever behind the scenes. I only know what I saw in that video didn't look so good. It did not look favorable for him. And a lot of people do assume that whether, him settling that lawsuit so quickly almost felt like he did not want to go through any of that sort of public trial, right? Let me see here. Tommy Gunn says Diddy for Supreme Court. Okay, now we know that's not going to happen. But this sort of hearing just makes my blood boil, because we have rights afforded to us in the Constitution, and it feels like every single one of those rights is being challenged, as if our interpretation of what the Constitution says outright doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't matter anymore, basically. And so I hope that the Supreme Court upholds the Constitution, because that is their job. It is not up for interpretation. It is very clear that if you are born here, that you are a U.S. citizen. There are these sort of carved out portions where it was meant for U.S. diplomat or for foreign diplomats, and that was it. Not just somebody who came here, was living here, or was, I feel like the sort of idea that if you are here and you have a baby, that baby, has those rights. And unfortunately, some of those babies are being sent to foreign countries with their mothers right now, even though they were born here, they have U.S. birth certificates. Those are being challenged, and it's very sad to see. Let's move on to another one, because like I said, there's a lot going on today, and a lot from this weekend that I don't know if you've missed it or not. This is one that Donald Trump announced over the weekend. He said there's going to be a very big, impactful Truth Social post that I'm going to say. And basically, it's that this morning, I think he was signing an executive order that aims to cut drug prices. This is very significant for a lot of people who get prescription drugs, who want their drug prices lowered. Under President Biden, they were able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, and then that was kind of scrapped. And now this is something, I saw something on TikTok, and this woman said he scrapped everything that Biden did. And then now he's gonna try to implement basically the same thing, right? And claim that he did it. So I think that every president comes in with an agenda. If you're going to cut Medicaid, but then say, we're going to cut your drug prices, people won't have Medicaid to pay for the drugs that they need. So you have to keep this in perspective of, we're going to cut $880 billion in Medicaid. Okay. So people then go without Medicaid, but then we're going to cut your drug prices. So the people who probably needed the drugs the most, the prescription medication, they won't have the Medicaid to pay for the drugs. So think about this in tandem. Think about this as, if you cut the Medicaid, then they have to pay out of pocket. Now, if those are significantly reduced, yes, they might be able to pay for some, but probably not for all, because as people get older and they're on Medicaid, or even babies who are on Medicaid, right? That sort of financial burden is not something that people can shoulder. So whether or not he's scrapped the old and now he's going to come back with his new, right, this sort of favored nation thing, it's kind of like, okay, thanks, but no thanks. Chris says, please show us where the Medicaid cut was. Cutting fraud out is not a cut. Please show your work. I do not have to do any of the work when everything on Google is free. But I do want to tell you that they are aiming to cut Medicaid. And if you were here a little bit ago, I did show an article where I did show some work here where it says House Republicans unveil Medicaid cuts. So yes, they are going to try to cut Medicaid. But thank you for playing. Because I'm not trying to show you something that isn't actually true. I'm trying to show you what they're actually trying to do. This is not something that I have just made up in my head. And I would never do that to you. So Chris, I hope that you understand that we are just showcasing here what they are announcing. They are signaling in Congress that they are trying to cut $880 billion in that Medicaid in order to give billionaires tax cuts. And now I know that there are some people who don't believe it, right? And actually, Chris is actually he's saying, where does it say it in the bill? Well, the bill actually hasn't been put together yet. In that article, they talk about stitching it together through different committees, and that there are certain committees that have this sort of power of the purse that is really where the bulk of it is coming from. So I would just pay attention to C-SPAN and a few of the others, because they talked about this week they're going to be holding a lot of different hearings that are going to focus on all the different committees and how they're supposed to be finding this sort of waste, fraud, and abuse that you were talking about. But the biggest cut is going to come from Medicaid. And when they put that sort of stitched bill together, that's going to be his big, beautiful bill, then you will see that they will go through with those Medicaid cuts. Yes. I think it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. This is where he's talking about the sort of drug price reductions that he was going to make. They're talking about his first term in this article. And although lowering the drug prices was a major talking point in his first administration, Trump hasn't focused on the topic much this term, but now he has. So let me get back into a little bit of this. It says the administration revive the idea, which they're talking about the most favored nation models, as a potential way to meet deep spending cuts and targets for Medicaid in the House. So I know that a lot of people keep saying, no, they're not going to cut Medicaid. But yes, they absolutely have been saying this. And they've been kind of saying it out loud. Now, I know that Chris is saying that Democrats lie, but there are a lot of people in the Congress who are telling the truth about where this sort of spending is going to be done. And so if you don't want to believe any of the Democrats, if you want to just read the bill, you will find that this is going to cut Medicaid because they can't find the amount of money anywhere else. It doesn't exist in any of the other sort of committees to find that large of a number and that specific of a number. So if you want to be really specific, I would just go in and look at all the committee meetings that they're having or the hearings that they're having this week, and then you will see for yourself, because I can't try to convince everybody of what's happening. You can see it with your own eyes. So let's get into a few other stories that are happening. Let's see here. This one is called, the headline says, Angry Trump Kills Woke Program and Accidentally Screws MAGA Voters. Okay, I want to get into this one because it's very interesting. Do you know how a lot of times people talk about the sort of wokeness that people have? Well, when Doge went in to do a lot of their sort of cuts, they were trying to use keywords to kind of, use DEI or use, things that had to do with women or the disabled or things like that to kind of keyword their way into cuts, right? So it says the other day during his intensive daily reading of complex policy papers, Trump noticed that a government initiative created by his predecessor had the word equity in its title. Naturally, this caught his attention as he appeared to conclude this could only mean the initiative was designed to help undeserving minorities. So he saw the word equity and thought, no, no, we can't help anyone because this word equity, that means those people are undeserving, okay? We keep on, which presented Trump with a ripe opportunity to demagogue about supposed reverse racism against white people. As Trump just announced on Truth Social, he has canceled the program, raging that it's racist. He fumed, no more woke handouts based on race, okay? So we get into this more. It says, except there's a problem here. The program in question, the Digital Equity Act, contained huge amounts of money for governments in GOP-run districts. Okay, so a lot of times we looked at what Doge was doing and they were just keywording their cuts, right? We need to take out equity, equitable things, DEI, blah, blah, blah. But really, the Digital Equity Act was not about giving these sort of handouts to undeserving people. So sometimes when people just read certain things and they just kind of make things up, kind of like he didn't know what the word concession meant when he was asked about it the other day with the UK deal with the US. Yeah, there's a lot of things he doesn't know and he doesn't want to learn about. He just assumes. And I don't know if you remember the sort of adage a long time ago that your mom probably said, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So when you assume as the president, then you don't actually know the full weight of your decision until after, which is why a lot of the Doge cuts that they did with people, some in the nuclear program and things like that, they had to scramble to try to hire those people back. Or like Caroline Leavitt, who said in a press briefing the other day that they fired the Librarian of Congress because she was not doing her job appropriately or something, and that she was putting the wrong books into the libraries for school. Now, if you know anything about the Library of Congress, they don't actually put books in the libraries at schools. So people just spout off when they don't actually know what they're talking about, because when you want a copyright, you send your stuff to the Library of Congress and they actually take it in and they look at your application and then they put it in the registry. They don't actually put books in schools. So it is a lot when we think about how they're making decisions, and they don't actually know what they're talking about before they make those decisions. Let me get to some of the comments. Let's see. Tommy Gunn says, Doge, our heroes, wait till you see that check. I think you're being sarcastic because I don't think a check is coming. I think he's going to say that the gold is missing at Fort Knox before we ever see any kind of check. Let's say it says, they also said they are moving fast and will make mistakes, but will correct mistakes fast as well. People do make mistakes, but these are not mistakes. I think that the one that they just did where the Digital Equity Act, absolutely. This was something where they didn't look to see what the program did before cutting it. People would be way more forgiving if they actually took the scalpel versus the sledgehammer. And I think that's what they did. They just said, nope, we see the word and cut, instead of looking at things meticulously with a really discerning eye and saying, oh, this is going to affect people in mostly Republican-run states. Yeah, let's look at that a little bit more carefully. I think everybody would look at that and say, yeah, they're doing their due diligence. They're actually wanting to know what they're cutting before they're cutting. This is another example of just flouting laws. Trump to accept luxury plane from Qatar to use as Air Force One. The Emoluments clause says this is illegal. So if he does this, then he is now, I mean, he already is a felon, 34 count felony conviction. And that still hasn't gone away. So this would just be another thing that he is flouting in the face of the American people, who most likely will face some empty shelves coming very soon. And yet he's going to be accepting a plane from Qatar. There are so many different sort of security reasons why this might be a problem, but then also the emoluments clause stating that it is illegal. In the comments, it says not convicted. I would Google that if I were you, because yes, if you notice the coverage from mainstream media, they used to say that he was accused. And now they're allowed to say that he was convicted because the charges were put into place. Let's see, Qatar, shame on them, still serving the slave master, says Osman. Chat says it's loaned to the US, not to Trump. What I've been under the impression is that this plane is being loaned for 3 years, and then once Trump's administration is done, that it will go into Trump's personal library, which means that it will be then gifted, right? So it's gifted to the US under the Trump administration for his use, and then it will be gifted permanently to Trump. So whether or not it is specifically, for Trump right now or Trump later, to accept a gift of this nature from a foreign country is against the law. It doesn't matter if it's on loan. The perception is the reality here that they are doing this for, I would say, good favor. And I know that Chet is saying then it's not illegal after his presidency. Actually, it's just part of the grift. And I know you don't want to believe that, but it is just part of the grift. To me, in my personal opinion, he is a con man who will continue to con. I saw somebody, and I made a video with her audio this morning. She said she was talking about the trade tariffs and the truce that kind of was implemented this morning with China. And she said, an arsonist is still an arsonist, even if he puts out his own fires. Okay, this was a bold statement, and I've never heard somebody say that, but he creates problems to then try to solve his own mess ups. Okay, he negotiated with himself with the Chinese tariffs. I don't know if you saw where he went from 145%, and then he tweeted out 85% seems fair. He never once negotiated that with China. He was negotiating with himself. And then this morning they came out with a 30%, 10% pause of 90 days, something or other. It's laughable. He created a problem that then he tried to have to put out the problem. He had to try to solve it for himself because China was unmoved. And they definitely taught him a lesson. And those ships, they're still not coming right now. They might be there are so many things that go into the sort of creation of the shipping orders, to loading the ships, to actually getting them sailing, to actually unloading them, to people at the ports having already laid off port workers, and all of the delivery drivers having to oh, now we get to come back. Oh no, but not for a month. There's so many different aspects of what he already messed with, and how they've already pivoted to other channels to get their soybeans, to make trade deals and pacts with other nations, to have to cut America or the United States out of what they would normally do. Mexico has this other sort of, bypass that they're trying to do from the Panama Canal, with this sort of unloading freight onto, this sort of train system that's going to go through Mexico to get to the other side. There are so many things that people are trying to do to cut out the United States at this point. He screwed us. And you can say that he's doing a good job, but he screwed us. And you have to acknowledge that it was a man-made problem. This was a very big man-made problem. And the other question a lot of people need to be asking, did the tariff truce that he did today, did that bring manufacturing back to the United States? No. He didn't say 500 companies quit, manufacturing in China, and now they're back in the United States. None of that happened. All of his sort of touting of manufacturing is going to come back to the United States and we're going to do so many great, all this great production here. That didn't happen. So his trade truce, while he may have negotiated it down with himself and then negotiated with his Chinese counterparts over the last 48 hours and cut down to a 90-day pause and a 30% and a 10%, that did not bring any manufacturing out of China and back to the United States. And if it did, it's probably just a handful of things where maybe some sort of small businesses did it because they can see that, maybe they can wiggle their way around actually making it here, but it didn't do any of that. So don't fool yourself into thinking that we have now plants, manufacturing warehouses, miraculously like coming here. It just didn't happen. Let's talk about this one because this is a really big one. If you have comments about Putin, Russia, and Ukraine, I want to hear them because this is something that he is, or that Putin has said they are ready for direct talks. Let me get out of your way. There's Putin right there. Now, I'm not sure what that actually means because any sort of ceasefire that they like approach, he's not for it. He breaks it. So any sort of direct talks with Ukraine, I was talking to my husband, I was like, I would never eat anything around this man. I don't even know if I would breathe in the same space as him. But they are open for direct talks with Ukraine as the US and European leaders press for a ceasefire. Yeah, we need a ceasefire over there. They need to stop killing each other. This is the best scenario. Stop killing each other, right? Let's see in the comments. Jeff said the real problem was the World Trade Agreement. I mean, say more because I'm always curious to hear people and what they are saying. But I don't know if he's really serious. I don't know if Putin is very serious about this. It's, a lot of politics is theater, right? It is the idea or the sort of proposal that this ceasefire could exist, right? The theater of like, we're going to get together, right? And that's part of it. I don't know if you remember over the weekend where the U.S. was meeting with China in Geneva over these sort of trade talks, and the Chinese delegation left in the middle of a meeting. There were some reports of them just getting up and leaving. That's theater, right? That's their leverage. And this, I believe, is more theater. Putin, I'm ready to talk to Ukraine. Let's talk, right? Putting those two leaders in the same room is theater for Putin. It might be a little bit of theater for Zelensky too, but I think it's theater because I don't think that Putin is ready to stop the war. But it does put him on a sort of back foot because Zelensky's saying, I want a ceasefire, right? So he's putting it on Putin to say, you have to stop too. Let's see here. There's a lot of chatter, and I love it. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe to my channel, it's free. Feel free to hit that subscribe button, and also the bell. Get the bell clicked on here so that you can get notified whenever I post a video. I post a lot of shorts. I do post a lot in our community tab, and I want to ask you, if you haven't been to the community tab, click on it because over like the last, what is it? We're on day 13. Isn't it the 13th? There's at least 13 polls in there that I would love for you to take. I want to get your opinion on a lot of different topics, from AI to the baby bonus, to student loans, to Social Security. There's a lot of different polls in my community tab. If you just kind of scroll through and take each one, I would very much be very grateful for that, because one of these days here after the month is over, I'm going to go back into those polls and read out kind of the results to get your take on how people are really feeling about some of the things that really impact us in our society. Let's see. Tease says Biden wouldn't even talk to Putin, even if the deals don't work. At least he's at the negotiating table. Well, so I appreciate that even if they don't work, he's at the negotiating table. But I don't appreciate the fact that he's been at the negotiating table a lot. Yeah, they negotiated a lot of deals and he broke them all. So it's one thing to say, I appreciate you for showing up. It's another thing to say, hold your end of the bargain, right? And he does not do that. So if we are still bringing him to the table, if he doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, what does that really do? Does it even do anything? It's more theater, right? Larry says, explain the Warsaw Pact off advanced territory of the UN and Russia. You can Google that because we're about to end here. But I think that there's a lot of different sort of deals that they came to. We think about like Crimea, and we think about all the things that this war has been going, what, since like 2014? Like, this is not new. And I believe that, if Putin continues to go in through Ukraine, he will end up at Poland. He will end up continuing his march through into more of Europe. It is not going to stop there. Thomas says, I'm just kidney. You have jokes. Why is it also fair to say, this is tease, it says, why is it also fair to say he wouldn't need to be there if Biden didn't allow Putin to go into Ukraine like Trump did? I'm confused at your question. Why is it also fair to say? He wouldn't need to be there if Biden, meaning Putin wouldn't need to be there if Biden didn't allow him to go into Ukraine. Now, here's the thing. When Trump was in office the first time, this was still an issue. And Obama was dealing with Putin as well. So I wouldn't say that this is one president's problem. I'm really talking about Putin and Ukraine, because Trump really wants to make a deal. I think he wants to make it a more favorable deal for Putin, because I think that he is serving Putin in a way. But I don't think that this is one president's problem. I think that this has gone over several administrations. But it really has to do with the fact that Putin is not to be trusted, right? Larry says, let me see, do I even know what the Warsaw Pact is? You might know more than I do, so why don't you say it in the comments? I love when people leave comments to make sure that our live stream is put out to many, many, many more people. Am I a history buff? No. Do I admit when I don't know things? Absolutely. So let me know what you know, and I will tell you my opinion on what you're saying. We can actually look up things while we talk, because I don't know everything there has to do with Poland and Warsaw. So let's look it up. Warsaw Pact Agreement. Let's see what you got. The Warsaw Pact, officially the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, was a military alliance established in 1955 by the Soviet Union and several Eastern countries in response to the formation of NATO. Yes, and we know that Putin would like to be part of this sort of NATO. It was a mutual defense pact aimed at countering Western influence and maintaining Soviet control over the region. Now, I understand that the Soviet Union, when I was younger, and many, many people, they were the enemy, right? And what has happened in recent years, especially in the last, I would say first administration of Trump and now the second administration, is that Trump has tried to make Putin seem like a reasonable figure. He's tried to make him seem like he just wants to end the war. But to me, he's still the enemy, not the people who are probably being a little brainwashed by the sort of state TV, or believing everything about America being, bad or not a good place, for anybody to exist in. But I do believe that Trump is making Putin look to a lot more people as if he is friendly, as if he has a right to take over countries, and that is wrong. So as far as your question, let me go back to the first version. Explain the Warsaw Pact off advanced territory of the UN and Russia. So I just explained what the summary is from the AI overview of Google. And I don't know that many people are wanting Russia to be part of a larger sort of force in the world. Obviously, they have different priorities. They have nuclear weapons. They're definitely in the same sort of rung as like Kim Jong-un. where the threat of that happening, like when Trump was in the Oval Office with Zelensky talking about, you're going to make World War III, when really I think Trump is probably sticking his neck out a little too far for Putin. Um, Yes, Larry says after World War II and the Allies made pact of no agreement of Baltic states, Ukraine and other Eastern Bloc countries for no advancement. Okay. Well, I also feel like this sort of agreement that the US had with Ukraine when they asked them to give up their nuclear weapon. And then the US said, but we will help defend you, right? We will help to make sure that if you give up that nuclear weapon, that we are going to be here for you. But that really is important when it comes to where we are now with Putin and Russia and Ukraine. Because if we told them we would be there and then now we're not there, kind of doesn't look good for us. Doesn't look good for us because a lot of people, especially in recent weeks and months with Trump at the helm, are saying the US is not trustworthy. We don't trust the US. We don't trust what he says because he might flip flop tomorrow. He might have a bad day and come on TV and say, we're not supporting Ukraine at all. And I think it's really good for Ukraine to visit with European nations and get their support because I don't know that they can trust the US to be on their side with Trump at the helm. He just doesn't look like he's out for anybody but himself. And when he did what he did to Zelensky in the Oval Office, you could tell they ambushed him. And he was very, very, I would say he stood up for himself very well with the facts. And he was very, very honest when he said, you have an ocean between you right now, but that might not be for a long time. Like, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't launch, something toward us. I think Putin is doing whatever he wants. And I think that Donald Trump is just trying to skirt by. But I think that we also owe it to Ukraine to defend them when we ask them to give up a nuclear weapon. It just seems like if we can't be trusted to hold up our end of the bargain, why should we, want, I don't know, Putin to do the same? You're not holding him to account. And then what? We're not going to be holding ourselves for account either. Yes, Christopher Martin says CNN. I actually didn't go into the article. I only talked about the headline because they are ready apparently for these sort of direct talks. If you want to read more about the article, you can be more discerning about what Putin is ready to talk about, where that might take place, and what he's ready to give up, because I don't think he's ready to give up anything. Billy Ray said, Joe would have gotten the ceasefire done. He just needed another 4 years. A lot of people think about Joe Biden as potentially he could have beat Donald Trump. But I think that would have just spurred Donald Trump to run again and try again because he wouldn't have had that sort of two-term thing going. And, what will be will be. But I think that I'm hoping that the courts stand firm with all the stuff we were talking about earlier with birthright citizenship. You saw a lot of people over the weekend being physically detained, ripped from their mother's arms over the weekend. The Newark mayor being arrested for, they say, trespassing, which if you're watching videos, it doesn't really seem from the eyewitness accounts that he was doing anything wrong. So I really think that the escalation is happening. The other thing that we didn't get to this morning is the resettlement of the white Afrikaners that are coming, I believe, today. Is it today or tomorrow? Tell me your thoughts about the relocation of white Afrikaners when they closed our refugee program. And then now Trump is allowing, I believe it's like 8,000 people to resettle here in the United States from South Africa because they claim that they are being persecuted in South Africa. But what I've heard of the people that he is bringing here, that is not the case. Jeff says, we have no business in Ukraine and many policies are made by Victoria Nuland here in the US, Newland needs to be replaced, been there for over a decade. Well, I mean, if she's been there for over a decade, then that means that there's at least some consistency and maybe some sort of archival, historical basis that she's got for whatever policies that she's implementing. But Trump has the ability to replace a lot of those people in the executive branch. So if you think she should be replaced, then maybe he thinks she should be replaced and he can just go ahead and do that. Tease says, yeah, because what's happening to the white people in Africa. Now, I've only read some reports where there are some different policies that have been kind of implemented in South Africa for people who have been claiming to own a lot of land. And those landowners happen to be white Afrikaners. Now, I might be botching this a little bit just from what I've been kind of gleaning from the news coverage, but that those people, these white Afrikaners, are being, I don't know if they're being asked or told about their land, that has to be either redistributed or something from the government in South Africa. And they feel that this sort of redistribution of that land that was colonized is persecution. What I've been hearing on different sort of social media outlets is that the people that believe they are persecuted, some of them, if not all of them, are extremely racist, and that the way that they talk to people is alarming. Now, I have not had any experiences with these people, so I can't say from firsthand experience. I am only telling you what I've seen from different people's posts on social media of their experiences with people who come from this particular area and what those experiences have meant to them. T says that these are farmers and they are being forced off. So that's what I was kind of saying, is that the land is being, I believe, redistributed by the government. Now, I'm not sure if they are all farmers. I'm not sure if they are really being persecuted, because the sort of definition of persecution, we can look it up, but what I'm hearing from these sort of reports is that that is not the definition that we have become accustomed to. Let's see. John Rhodes says, sorry, I didn't mean to send that. I didn't see what you sent. What's your thoughts on truck drivers that don't speak the language, excuse me, that they have to get interpreters, but yet kill multiple people? I don't know about the killing of people, but I do know that they did implement some sort of rule. I'm not sure how they're going about enforcing it. I've heard that some truck way stations have, been asking the drivers to sort of test on their ability to speak, write, and read in English. My opinion on this is that if you have taken a driver's test and you know how to drive, and that is the requirement for the job that you have right now, that changing the rules should require you to revisit them in a very structured way, not stopping somebody on the side of the road and saying, now this rule's in effect as of 5 p.m. today, you must know how to read, write, and speak English, okay? Now, if it wasn't part of their job description and they're already on the road and now they're approaching a way station and as of 4:55 now the rules have changed, that's a problem. If the rule had changed and they said, we're going to give everybody the opportunity to go back and retest their driver's license test in English, and we're going to implement this for a year from now, because we don't know how many people took their driver's license tests in other languages, because that is offered. That would be one way to go about it. But I feel like what they did is they changed the rule and said, the rules changed a minute ago, and now anybody who goes up to these way stations, they're being tested, they're being pulled off the road, and I don't even know what their load, like where is their truck going? Where are they, just sitting on the side of the road? I mean, I feel like the sort of implementation of this sort of rule about language and making sure that everyone speaks to a specific level or reads or writes at a specific level, changing the rules one day and then the next day it's supposed to just be. I think it's a hard way to implement a rule when it wasn't a rule the day before. Let's see. John Rhodes says, well, the rule was actually the rule was actually the hold on, actually on the books for the past 100 years. And also, if you have an international driver's license, that does not cover a commercial driver's license. Okay, so yes, so if I go to France and I want to drive in France, I have a driver's license from California and I can get a rental car. And I don't have to take a driver's license a driver's license test in French in order to drive internationally on a French road, okay? They're not making me for my vacation, okay? But if I stayed there, because we were there for a year, and I wanted to have a French license, I would have had to take the driver's license test in French, okay? But that's not how we do it here. In different states, states allow people to get a license and sometimes take their driver's license test in different languages. So you can get a commercial driver's license and take the test in another language. So what I'm saying is that if you allow people to get a driver's license and take the test in another language, but then federal rules change and overnight now you're supposed to know how to read, speak, and write in English when really you know the rules of the road because you passed your driver's license test in another language, I feel like the implementation of that is off. Okay. Jeff says, all truck drivers must stop at way stations when open unless you have electronic bypass. Too many foreign drivers means less pay for truckers. You must be able to read English to drive a commercial, I'm assuming, truck. Okay, so this is okay. If this is the rule, then how did they get around that? That's my question. Did foreign drivers pass the test and then suddenly fall off with their English? Or were they not doing that at the commercial level before? Because if they have the commercial driver's license and they're testing in English, then why are we making sure that at the way station they can speak English? Because if they can read the rules of the road in English and they've already tested in English, then I don't think it should be an issue. But I don't work in trucking. But, I often think that a lot of the rules that people try to enforce overnight don't work. Even rules that are tried to be, implemented over time don't work. And the perfect example of this is the Real ID. This deadline has been coming for years with the Real ID. And you know what they had to say? We got to push it back. We got to push it back to, I think, 2027. Yes, Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security, she was like, yeah, the TSA, they're just going to ask you a few more questions if you don't have your Real ID, but don't worry, you can still fly, because they knew hardly anybody went and got a Real ID, and the differences from state to state of what that Real ID said were too big. Not everybody had the same, sort of requirements of what the driver's license was and what the Real ID, it's messed up. Okay, John says, no, the federal rules never change. The problem is they do not post the language on the sign, and Google cannot translate fast enough is the exact problem. The language thing is new. It's less than 10 years old. So before that, you had to speak English, period. So I'm assuming, just from driving myself, that looking at a sign on the road, maybe it's the street sign. Okay, if it's a street sign, it doesn't matter that the street sign is in English. If I'm looking for a specific road, avenue, whatever, I'm looking for that road. I don't need to have a sentence around that road to know that I need to take that road. If you're looking for a yield or a stop sign or whatever it is, the shapes and the colors of those signs determine if it's a highway or a regular road or whatever. So I'm assuming that the signage and the colors and the signals should be good enough for someone to take a test, understand those, and pass. But the sort of competency of pulling someone off of a way station to test them in their English, Reading, writing, and speaking is different. Now, I'm not sure if that's because in their job they have to speak a lot or that they're writing a lot while they're driving. I don't know. Like the competency seems like it's a very sort of subjective thing because if you notice, the president doesn't really have a great grasp of English when it comes to his sort of level of speaking. We could argue that yes, he did go to a college, but that doesn't mean that, his sort of writing was at this sort of distinguished, like Pulitzer Prize level, which is why most newspapers are written at an eighth grade level. So I would wonder why, or I should say, wonder what the level would be that they're testing them at. Is it at an eighth grade level? Is it at a high school senior 12th grade level? Like what is the competency? What do they actually have to be able to do? I would love to like see that test, like know what they're asking, know what the proficiency would be, like what the right answer would be. So yeah. Anyways, I really have enjoyed my conversation with all of you guys. Today is Monday. We're just starting out the week. If you haven't ever joined me on my live stream, I do it Monday through Friday in the mornings. And subscribe to my channel, hit the bell notification so you know you get notified whenever I post a video, go on a live stream. I do a lot of shorts, so you'll see a lot of content. And I do a lot in my community tab too. So definitely hit up the community tab. There's at least 10 polls that I would love for you to take. They're easy. It's just about your opinion about the baby bonus, AI, privacy, data security, social security, a lot of stuff that I want to know how you feel about those specific topics. So take the polls, they're free. And I will see you on Tuesday, tomorrow. And if you are so inclined, in the description, you'll find my Substack. If you want to follow me on Substack as well, it's free too. So I look forward to seeing you guys. You're still talking in the comments. Let's see. Oh, Vivian, see you. Nice to see you today. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good Monday, guys.